Channel message.
Some people will hand you a wound they never healed and call it family history. Then, when you refuse to carry it, they will accuse you of forgetting the past. But remembering what happened is not the same as inheriting somebody else's unresolved relationship with it. Some people do not merely want you to believe what they experience. They want their experience to become the authority over what you are allowed to remember, allowed to forgive, love, or spiritually reconcile. They want their anger to govern your memories, their resentment to determine your loyalties, their pain to decide whether the love you received was real. What happened to them may be true, right? They may have been abandoned, endured cruelty, neglect, instability, betrayal, abuse, or a version of someone that left lasting damage, right? Their experience deserves to be acknowledged, but their relationship with that person was not automatically your relationship with that person. You may have known another version. That does not mean you encountered only love and light. It does not mean the anger, dysfunction, volatility, or the inherited wounds disappeared before you entered the picture. Patterns carried through a bloodline do not vanish overnight. A person can become softer and still react from an unhealed place. They can love you and still behave in ways that are unacceptable. They can evolve while still struggling to get their shit together, right? Receiving a different version of someone does not always mean receiving a perfect version. Sometimes you encounter the same temper, defensiveness, control, emotional immaturity, or destructive tendencies, but something different happened once those patterns enter your connection. The behavior was confronted. Boundaries were established. Anger was no longer accepted as permission for disrespect. Love was not used to excuse mistreatment. You required something different. And in some cases, the person made a different decision. They learned how to approach you differently. You learned how to communicate with them differently. Patterns that once controlled the relationship were named, challenged, and interrupted. Two strong, wounded people can meet each other with all the force of two titans and eventually decide that every conflict does not need to become a war. They can recognize where they have been cruel, deceptive, defensive, dismissive, controlling, or emotionally unsafe. They can decide to stop reaching for the same weapons. They can forgive without pretending nothing happened. They can love one another without agreeing to continue destroying one another. That is also part of the truth. You are not claiming the person was innocent, right? You are saying their worst behavior was not the final chapter between you. You are not claiming they were perfect. You are saying the relationship did not remain where it began. Sometimes breaking a generational cycle means leaving. Sometimes it requires distance. Sometimes it requires complete separation. But sometimes it looks like two people refusing to continue the dysfunction in the same form in which they inherited. A bloodline can be interrupted through departure. It could also be interrupted through accountability, boundaries, changed behavior, forgiveness, and repair. You meet the wounds. You simply refuse to let them become the entire relationship. There can be a particular kind of guilt in being loved by someone who treated another person terribly. You may begin questioning whether your peace is offensive, whether your memories are morally wrong, whether acknowledging the love you receive somehow betrays the person who did not receive it. You may even feel pressure to prove compassion by becoming angry, to prove you believe them by rejecting every good memory, to prove you understand their suffering by manufacturing hatred inside yourself. But you are not required to emotionally injure yourself to create equality between two different experiences. You can believe what happened to them without denying what happened between you. You can acknowledge the suffering without declaring your love fraudulent. You can have compassion for what they were denied without becoming ashamed of what you received. Your good memories do not invalidate their experience. Their painful memories do not erase yours. Two truths can exist without one being used to destroy the other. Someone else may never have received resolution like you did. They may have never received an apology, accountability, tenderness, change behavior, or just the opportunity to make peace. And that can be painful. That is painful. Your memories may place them in direct contact with what they were denied. Instead of admitting that the difference hurts, they may try to discredit the version you experience. For every loving memory, they produce a painful one. For every moment of tenderness, they introduce another act of cruelty. For every memory that gives you peace, they try to place shame, anger, or disgust over it. They may not be satisfied with you believing what happened to them, right? They want allegiance, right? They want retroactive loyalty. They want you to prove that you respect their suffering by adopting their hatred. If you remember kindness, they call you naive. If you acknowledge growth, they insist you never knew the real person. If you remember love, they redefine it as manipulation. Because the person wounded them, they believe you should no longer be permitted to remember being loved by them. That is not simply asking to be heard. That is demanding retroactive loyalty. But another person's experience does not grant them ownership to your memories. They know what occurred inside their relationship, right? They do not know every conversation, confrontation, apology, boundary, disappointment, reconciliation, or spiritual resolution that existed inside of yours. At the same time, the peace you made with someone does not settle what they may still owe another person, right? Your forgiveness does not cancel someone else's injury. Your reconciliation does not become their absolution. The fact that someone changed with you does not mean they repaired what they damaged elsewhere. The fact that peace became possible in one relationship does not mean another person must forgive what was never addressed in theirs. You are allowed to honor your resolution without using it to silence their suffering. They are allowed to name what happened without using it to dismantle your resolution. That is a balance, right? Sometimes peace was made before the person left the earth, right? You may still remember what hurt. You may still wish certain things hadn't happened or had happened differently, but you are not carrying a mountain of resentment because the relationship did not end where it began. You addressed what could be addressed. You forgave what you consciously chose to forgive. You accepted the love that became available without lying about what came before it. That is a different spiritual ending. And genuine peace does not require the truth to disappear. Peace can withstand complexity. Denial cannot. Denial depends on avoiding certain memories, refusing difficult information, or protecting an idolized image that collapses the moment another perspective enters the room. Integration is different. Integration can acknowledge cruelty without erasing tenderness. It can recognize betrayal without declaring every connection false. It can admit that someone failed terribly in one season and developed in another. It can hold accountability and compassion without confusing either one for innocence, right? If another person's account forces you to examine something you had never confronted, that examination may be necessary. But if you are already looked honestly at the person, the relationship, the dysfunction, and your own reasons for forgiving, you do not have to surrender your peace every time someone reopens the case. You understand? You are not required to place your memories on trial whenever they need another witness. Some people preserve every betrayal, humiliation, failure, or dark story as a permanent archive of injury. Every offense remains available. Every wound is reopened. Every terrible moment is presented as a person's complete legacy. That may be how they survived. It may be how they made sense of what happened. That may not be consciously trying to intend to burden you, right? Their need to be witnessed may be so consuming that they no longer recognize where their testimony ends and your emotional boundaries begin. But intention does not erase impact. Pain can be understandable and still become intrusive. Trauma can explain why someone repeatedly returns to the same story without making you responsible for receiving it indefinitely. One person may preserve the injury. Another may confront it and make peace where peace becomes possible. Neither response means the past was imaginary. But the worst moments do not have to become the only story that survives. There's also something deeply disrespectful about appointing yourself as the authority over another person's intimate life, right? You do not get to decide which relationship mattered most to someone else. You do not get to assign their greatest love, happiest years, deepest connection, or most meaningful bond. You may have witnessed parts of another person's life, but you did not inhabit it. You did not experience every private conversation, sacrifice, conflict, reconciliation, disappointment, or moment of devotion. You were not there. You cannot take fragments of someone else's history and appoint yourself the sole authority over what their life meant. Other people's relationships are not props for your storytelling. At some point, a direct question must be asked. What are you asking the listener to do with this information? Are you creating understanding? Are you protecting someone from an active threat? Are you correcting a dangerous lie? Are you offering context that can help prevent the pattern from repeating? Or are you handing them distress for no reason other than making sure they can never remember that person peacefully again? And if you are the person repeatedly delivering these stories, you need to ask yourself that question honestly. You may believe you are simply telling the truth. You may believe you are preserving history, correcting a false image, or making sure nobody forgets what you endured. But the fact that something is true does not automatically make every person the appropriate recipient of it. The fact that you survived an experience does not give you unlimited access to another person's mind, memories, emotions, or spiritual life. You may have told the story so many times that you no longer hear how severe it sounds. You may have repeated the betrayal, violence, abandonment, deception, humiliation, and cruelty until it became ordinary language in your mouth. But familiarity has not made the information less disturbing. It has only made you more accustomed to carrying it. The person listening may not be accustomed to that at all, right? What has become an antidote to you may become a psychological rupture for them. What you deliver casually may force them to reconsider their childhood, their identity, their family, their grief, or every loving memory they thought they understood. You cannot casually place emotionally devastating information inside another person and assume they should know how to carry it simply because you have learned how to repeat it without trembling. Your numbness does not make the material neutral. Your comfort discussing it does not mean they consented to receiving it. Your need to speak does not automatically override their need for emotional safety. There is a difference between giving testimony and psychologically ambushing somebody. There is a difference between sharing necessary context and forcing another person to absorb the most disturbing details of your past because you have nowhere else to place them. There is a difference between wanting to be understood and demanding that somebody else become emotionally responsible for what happened to you. You may not consciously intend to be abusive, right? You may not wake up planning to destabilize anyone, right? But repeated disregard for another person's boundaries, personal history, spiritual resolution, grief, or stated desire not to continue the conversation can become emotionally abusive regardless of what you intended. You understand? An intent does not erase the pattern, especially when they have asked you to stop. Especially when you know the information leaves them distressed. Especially when you keep returning to the same material after they have made it clear that they do not want to carry it. Especially when you punish them for remembering the person differently. At that point, I am only telling the truth becomes a shield used to avoid responsibility for how you are delivering it. Truth does not excuse cruelty. Trauma does not excuse intrusion. Being wounded does not grant you permission to wound everybody who comes close enough to listen. You do not get to force someone into an emotional crisis and then accuse them of being weak, naive, dishonest, or disloyal because they did not receive the information the way you wanted it. You do not get to unload the most diabolical experiences of your life into another person without warning and then leave them alone with the spiritual and psychological aftermath. That's abusive. You do not get to disregard their relationship with the person because you believe your relationship was more revealing, more important, or more real. So, before you speak, ask yourself, did this person ask to know this? Is this information necessary for their protection or well-being? Am I offering understanding, or am I trying to transfer my emotional position to them? Do I want them informed, or do I want them disturbed? Am I speaking because this serves their life, or because I need somewhere to discharge what I have never processed? And that's real. And if you want or need a witness, choose a witness who has consented to that role. Choose a therapist. Choose a support group. Choose a trusted person who has the emotional capacity and willingness to sit with the material. Write it. Pray through it. Process it somewhere designed to hold the weight. But stop turning relatives, descendants, children, former partners, grieving people, and whoever happens to answer the phone into involuntary containers for experiences they did not live. Your pain deserves somewhere to go. That does not mean it is entitled to go everywhere. You may deserve to be heard, but other people also deserve the right to decide what enters their minds, their spirits, and their relationship with the past. If you genuinely want to be understood, you must also care about the condition in which you leave the person who listened. Truth matters. Accountability matters. Abuse should not be concealed, and the dead should not be sanitized simply because they are gone. But truth offered for liberation feels different from truth delivered to contaminate somebody else's peace. One creates understanding. One produces discernment. One helps people recognize what must not be repeated. The other places an emotional burden inside another person and leaves them to manage the aftermath. Not every painful fact belongs in every person's spirit. Knowing something does not mean you consented to become its permanent custodian. Honesty without purpose can become cruelty. Honesty without consent can become intrusion. Honesty used to destabilize someone becomes a weapon. Some people disguise emotional dumping as family connection. They reach out under the language of concern, familiarity, remembrance, or just wanting you to know. But every conversation returns to the same scandals, betrayals, humiliations, and grievances. Diabolical ass situations. They do not know how to connect without reopening the old wound. They do not know how to maintain familiarity without discussing who betrayed whom. They do not merely want to understand what they survive. They want you to adopt the emotional position they developed because of it, right? They want you to reopen something you had already resolved, or they want you to create an injury where you had already found peace. At some point, unresolved trauma must be taken to a goddamn therapist instead of deposited into whoever answers the phone, right? You can believe somebody without becoming them. You can respect what they survive without manufacturing hatred to prove you care. You can have compassion for their experience without making your spirit its storage place. You are allowed to say, I believe that this happened to you. I'm not asking you to forget it. I'm not asking you to change how you remember that relationship, but I will not repeatedly debate my relationship with that person. I will not defend every memory. I will not reject the love I received to prove that I respect your suffering. I can acknowledge your experience without surrendering my own. That is called a boundary, right? This matters even more when you have done spiritual work around your family and bloodline, right? You may have come here to confront shame, silence, abuse, secrecy, destructive loyalty, and survivor patterns that existed before you were born, right? Clearing the bloodline does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means refusing to organize your entire identity around what happened. It means telling the truth without worshiping the wound. It means ending secrecy without turning exposure into entertainment. It means refusing to confuse family loyalty with the obligation to suffer forever. You did not clear generations of pain just to let somebody reinstall it through conversation. Spiritual inheritance does not occur merely because you learned what happened. It occurs when another person's unresolved experiences begins governing your emotions, your loyalties, relationships, your identity, and the stories you pass forward. It happens when you accept the role of permanent grievance keeper. When you begin carrying the shame that was assigned before you were born. When resentment from one relationship starts contaminating connections that had nothing to do with the original betrayal. When anger becomes a requirement for belonging. When the next generation is taught not only what happened, but also whom they are expected to hate because of it. The cycle is broken when the emotional assignment attached to the past is consciously refused. Another person's unresolved relationship with someone from the bloodline does not become spiritual law over your relationship with them. Their resentment does not require you to feel ashamed because you receive love where they receive suffering. Your relationship with God, the Holy Spirit, the divine, the universe, your ancestors, or a higher power is sacred territory. Nobody gets to enter that territory and dictate which memories you must reject, which connections you may honor, or which souls must remain permanently condemned. That does not mean every person in the bloodline was innocent. It means somebody else's unprocessed pain does not outrank your spiritual discernment. Sometimes a superiority narrative is hiding beneath the storytelling. Some people need an entire branch of a family to remain damaged so that their branch can remain successful, respectable, intelligent, healed, or morally superior. They need everyone from a particular generation, place, or bloodline to remain dysfunctional. Their family becomes proof of goodness. Another family's suffering becomes proof of inferiority. But Your healing disrupts that story. Your life proves somebody learned, somebody changed, somebody developed discernment, somebody interrupted what has been passed down. You are evidence that redemption occurred in a place that had already been declared irredeemable. That may be why they keep reaching into an old timeline and returning with stories designed to drag you back into it. They cannot fully acknowledge who you have become without admitting that their judgment of the entire bloodline was incomplete. Pay attention to people who insist that pain must always remain in the foreground. They may tell themselves they are preserving history, teaching a lesson, or making sure the past is never repeated. But remembering what happened is not the same as repeatedly placing someone's worst moments into the spirit of everyone connected to them. A lesson can be retained without keeping the wound open. Wisdom remembers what happened, right? It recognizes the pattern and makes a different decision. Unresolved pain keeps returning to the scene. It retells the same story. It recruits new witnesses just to tell the same story. It finds another person to carry the emotional weight and causes that remembrance. Some people have mistaken being the bearer of bad news for having a purpose. They have appointed themselves the permanent spokesperson for somebody else's darkest years, even after that person is no longer here, even after other relationships reach their own resolution, even after they're repeating the information that no longer has a benefit and does not protect anyone. They believe it is their responsibility to keep every failure, humiliation, and act of cruelty in circulation. But when the only way you know how to preserve a lesson is to keep crucifying the same person in every conversation, the lesson has not been integrated. You are still living inside the event. You are still standing in the same emotional location. You are not carrying wisdom forward. You are carrying the injury forward. Those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. Does not mean the past must become a permanent residence. It means you remember enough to recognize what cannot be permitted again. You understand the pattern. You make a different choice. Then you allow the lesson to become wisdom instead of requiring the wound to remain alive. There's a difference between preserving truth and preserving suffering. There's a difference between saying this happened and it taught me something and saying this happened so nobody connected to this person should ever be allowed to remember them without pain. At that point, the story is no longer being kept alive for protection. It remains in circulation because the person carrying it has never emotionally left the past. They may present themselves as the responsible one, historian, the truth dealer, or the person courageous enough to say what everyone else avoids. But constantly reopening another person's grief, their memories, their trauma, their relationships, their spiritual connection is not courage. It is repetition without resolution. You do not have to become the next carrier simply because they refuse to put the burden down. You do not have to inherit their position as keeper of the grievance. You do not have to keep somebody else's worst moments alive to prove that you understand what happened. You can remember the lesson without surrendering your peace. You can acknowledge the past without rebuilding your identity around it. You can respect what someone survived without allowing their unresolved pain to become your spiritual inheritance. Let them keep the relationship with the past they have chosen, if they so desire. Let them continue carrying the story if they believe that is their responsibility. But they do not get to make it yours. Their truth does not own your memories. Their suffering does not outrank the peace you made. Your forgiveness does not erase what happened to them. Their experience does not erase what became possible for you. Their inability to leave the past does not create a spiritual obligation for you to return there with them. You have already taken the lesson. You have already confronted what needed to be confronted. You already made peace where peace became possible. Do not let someone who has mistaken repetition for remembrance convince you that healing means you have forgotten what happened. You did not forget the past. You refuse to worship it. You refuse to let it become your identity. You refuse to accept somebody else's unresolved pain as a sacred duty. You did not deny what happened to them. You simply refuse to deny what happened between you. And you refuse to inherit their inability to leave it.
End of message.